Long before paved highways and flight paths, a hidden network of roads connected the world's first great cities. These ancient pathways carried more than just trade goods. They were the channels through which ideas, faiths, and entire cultures flowed, fundamentally shaping the course of human history. By the end of this journey, you will see the modern map not as separate nations, but as a living legacy of these first global connections. We will uncover how caravans crossed vast deserts to deliver stones more precious than gold, and how a single forgotten route could determine the fate of an empire. What invisible threads from our deepest past still guide the way we connect today? The first light of dawn would have touched the towering mud brick walls of Uruk, casting long shadows across streets that were a marvel of their age. At the same moment, in the meticulously planned city of Mohenjo-Daro, thousands awoke to a revolutionary new way of life, the urban experience. Between 4,000 and 5,000 years ago, this phenomenon ignited independently in several cradles of civilization, from Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley to Egypt and China. These were not merely large villages, they were profound experiments in human society, where the very concepts of community, power, and identity were being rewritten. As archaeologist Jane McIntosh observes, the first cities were crucibles of innovation, where writing, monumental architecture, and complex governance were born almost simultaneously across the globe. What defined these pioneering metropolises? They shared a powerful set of characteristics: centralized authority, often a priesthood or royal court, directed the community's efforts. Labor became specialized, with individuals dedicating their lives not to farming, but to crafts like potting, weaving, or metalworking. This was only possible because of surplus agriculture, a bounty of grain produced by farmers in the surrounding lands that could feed the entire urban population. But this concentration of people and power created a new and pressing need. A city is a hungry engine, constantly consuming resources that its immediate environment cannot provide. It has an insatiable appetite for metals to forge tools, timber to build structures, and precious stones to signify status and sanctity. Consider the sheer scale of organization required to raise a Mesopotamian ziggurat or an Egyptian pyramid. These were not projects built with local materials alone. They demanded vast quantities of cedar wood from distant mountains, lapis lazuli from mines hundreds of miles away, and gold from desert wadis. The very existence of the city depended on a web of connections stretching far beyond its walls. This is the irresistible pull of the urban magnet. The concentration of people, ideas, and power in these hubs created a gravitational force, drawing pathways toward them across deserts, over mountains, and along river valleys. The birth of the city was, in that very moment, the conception of the road. It was a necessity born from ambition, setting the stage for a network that would one day connect entire continents. That merchant, guiding his heavily laden donkeys away from the safety of Uruk's walls, was embarking on more than a simple business trip. He was a vital thread in the fabric of the world's first global networks, a web spun from three powerful strands. The first and most obvious was economic necessity, the relentless drive to acquire what your own land could not provide. Cities like those in Sumer, rich in grain but poor in mineral wealth, developed an insatiable appetite for luxuries and essentials alike. Lapis lazuli, with its deep celestial blue, was quarried from a single source in the distant mountains of modern Afghanistan. This precious stone, along with cedar wood from Lebanon and copper from Oman, was not merely for adornment. It was a substance of power used in the royal regalia and religious icons that legitimized the rule of kings and priests. The movement of these goods created chains of dependency that stretched for thousands of miles. Archaeologists can trace the flow of a black volcanic glass called obsidian from its source in Anatolia all the way to Mesopotamian cities. Each piece carries a chemical fingerprint, a silent testament to a journey across a vast and organized trade network. This was not random wandering. It was deliberate, calculated commerce, the engine of early civilization. But these routes carried more than just sacks of grain and blocks of stone. They were the original information superhighways, transmitting ideas and innovations that would reshape continents. The second strand was the flow of technology and knowledge. The invention of the wheel and axle in one region did not stay there for long. It traveled, revolutionizing transport and warfare wherever it went. Similarly, advanced techniques in metallurgy, allowing for the creation of stronger bronze alloys, spread along these same paths. Imagine a skilled artisan migrating from one city to another, his mind a living library of technical secrets. He did not just bring his tools, he brought the very knowledge of how to use them. This exchange also included the most vital knowledge of all, agriculture. The trade of seed stocks and farming techniques between regions allowed for new, hardier crops to be introduced, stabilizing food supplies and supporting ever-growing urban populations. The third strand weaving these networks together was a blend of diplomacy, faith, and military might. Envoys and ambassadors traveled these roads carrying treaties and lavish gifts, their journeys helping to maintain fragile alliances between powerful city-states. Meanwhile, the human desire for spiritual connection carved paths to sacred sites, establishing pilgrimage routes that saw a steady flow of travelers. And always there was the military need to project power. The ability to move troops rapidly to defend a frontier or to control a valuable trade route was a paramount concern for any early state. These roads were the arteries of empire, allowing for both defense and expansion. When you trace these three strands together, a profound question emerges. Were these early exchanges the world's first form of globalization? They created a web of interdependencies where the fate of a city on the Euphrates could be influenced by a mine in Afghanistan or a forest in Lebanon. The creation of these pathways was a monumental human achievement, but it raises a practical question. How do you build a road that can last for centuries across deserts, over mountain passes, and through river valleys? The answer lies in the forgotten engineering marvels of the ancient world. A drone hovers silently over a dense green canopy, its laser scanner painting the landscape with invisible light. This is LIDAR, a technology that strips away the veil of vegetation to reveal the ghostly outlines of a causeway, a perfectly straight line cutting through the jungle where no modern road exists. We have moved far beyond the lone archaeologist with a shovel. Today, researchers like Dr. Sarah Parkak use eyes in the sky to see ancient landscapes on a scale never before possible, identifying features completely invisible from the ground. This is the quiet revolution of remote sensing, and it is fundamentally changing how we trace these lost highways. One of the most powerful tools is ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. Think of it as a form of sonar for the Earth. By sending radar pulses into the ground, it creates a detailed map of what lies beneath without ever breaking the soil. It can reveal the compacted gravel of a roadbed, the foundations of a way station, or the drainage ditches that flanked an ancient path. From even higher up, satellite imagery analysts look for subtle clues like crop marks. When an ancient road is buried, the soil depth above it changes. This affects how plants grow, creating lines of slightly stunted or healthier vegetation that trace the route from the air. To confirm these findings, scientists use sediment core sampling, extracting long tubes of earth that act like a timeline. A distinct layer of crushed stone or packed clay, found at a certain depth, can be dated to confirm it was a walking surface from a specific era. But the evidence is not just in the ground, it is in the objects left behind. Isotopic analysis is a fascinating process that can take a single pottery shard or a tiny bronze fragment and determine its origin. The chemical signature of the clay or metal holds a fingerprint pointing to the specific mountain or river valley where it was made. By finding these artifacts along a suspected route, we can map their journey mile by mile. All this physical data then feeds into computational modeling, where computers simulate thousands of possible paths between two ancient cities. The model considers the lay of the land, the easiest passes through mountains, the locations of water sources, and the most efficient grades for travel. The most logical pathways that emerge often match the faint lines discovered by satellites and radar. A stunning example is the rediscovery of the Persian royal road. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a magnificent highway over 1,600 miles long, with royal couriers and way stations. For centuries, it was thought to be an exaggeration. But satellite imagery and ground surveys have confirmed its route, revealing an organized system of roads that functioned like a skeletal framework for an empire, allowing messages to travel from one end to the other in a matter of days. So how does a single worn cobblestone help reconstruct an entire network? That one stone is a data point. Combined with the isotopic signature of a nearby potsherd, the crop mark seen from space, and the computer model that predicts the path, it becomes part of a collective testimony. Each piece of subtle evidence is a whisper from the past, and together they form a chorus, guiding us to the specific arteries that connected the world. The most famous of these networks was not just a road, but a transformative force that linked the East and the West for centuries. The dust of the Mesopotamian plain was never still for long, stirred by the feet of donkeys and the wheels of carts moving between the great city-states. This was the cradle of civilization and also the cradle of the organized road. Here, the path was not just a line in the sand, it was a managed artery of empire. Cuneiform tablets studied by scholars like Amanda Podany reveal these were not informal trails, but official routes with designated way stations, offering shelter and supplies to the couriers and merchants who were the lifeblood of the cities. The engineering was deliberate and ingenious. In the flat, flood-prone land between the Tigris and Euphrates, builders constructed raised causeways. These elevated pathways, built from layers of packed earth and gravel, kept travelers and their precious cargo above the water during the seasonal inundations that could turn the land into a vast marsh. In particularly wet areas, they even paved sections with durable baked clay bricks, creating a surface that could withstand the elements and the constant traffic. This physical network was mirrored by a human one, the establishment of Caravan. These were not simple rest stops, but full trading colonies established in distant lands. A merchant from would find a familiar community with its own administration and warehouses in a foreign city, smoothing the complex process of long-distance exchange. Through this organized web flowed the essential ingredients of civilization. Copper arrived from distant Oman, timber for construction was floated down the Euphrates from the forests of Lebanon, and the deep blue lapis lazuli, so prized for religious art, made an incredible journey from a single source in the mountains of modern Afghanistan. Consider the specific route linking the great city of to the Dilmun civilization on modern Bahrain. This was a hybrid pathway, combining overland travel with a maritime leap across the Persian Gulf. It facilitated a vibrant exchange, with Mesopotamian textiles and grain moving south, while Dilmun's famed pearls, dates, and copper flowed north. This constant, structured interaction between often competing cities raises a fascinating question. Did the very pressure of conflict and commerce actually accelerate innovation? The need to outmaneuver a rival, to transport goods more efficiently, or to secure a distant resource likely spurred advancements in logistics, metallurgy, and even political organization. The Mesopotamian network was a brilliant, organic template born from necessity. But to the east, in the Indus Valley, a different kind of system was being engineered, one of breathtaking precision and mysterious order. While the roads of Mesopotamia were arteries of imperial ambition, a different kind of order was emerging to the east. Step into the Indus Valley, and you enter a world of stunning precision, where cities were laid out with a geometric clarity that feels almost modern. The streets of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were not organic paths worn by generations of feet. They were engineered masterpieces planned from the very first brick. Wide, straight boulevards ran in perfect grids, intersecting at right angles to create city blocks of a standardized size. Beneath these streets lay the civilization's true genius, an integrated, covered drainage system that channeled wastewater away from homes and public spaces. This was not the work of isolated villages. It was the signature of a society with a powerful, centralized vision for urban life. The uniformity is breathtaking, as archaeologist Jonathan Mark Kenoyer observes. The same standardized brick sizes, the same city layouts, and the same systems of weights and measures are found across a vast territory, from the coast to the foothills of the Himalayas. This implies a remarkable degree of communication and shared standards, a cultural and perhaps even administrative cohesion that is unique in the ancient world. Yet for all their internal order, the external connections of the Indus people present a captivating mystery. We do not find the grand, stone-paved royal highways of later empires. Instead, their network appears to have been a masterpiece of subtle efficiency, focused on local distribution and, crucially, water. Their long-distance trade is proven not by roads, but by the objects they left behind. Beautiful, intricately etched carnelian beads from the Indus Valley have been found in the royal tombs of Ur. Distinctive square seals, inscribed with their still undeciphered script and images of mythical beasts, turn up in the ruins of Mesopotamian cities. These were not random trinkets lost by wandering travelers. They are the silent markers of a robust, organized exchange. So how did these goods travel such vast distances? The evidence points to two primary routes. Overland, caravans likely navigated through mountain passes like the Bolan Pass, a natural corridor linking the Indus Plains to the Iranian Plateau and beyond. But the Indus people were also master mariners. At the coastal city of Lothal, archaeologists uncovered the world's earliest known dock, a sophisticated, brick-lined basin connected by a channel to the sea. From here, their distinctive goods, including what may have been the world's first cotton textiles, were loaded onto ships bound for the Persian Gulf and the cities of Mesopotamia. This maritime network was their superhighway. The puzzle deepens when we consider what is missing. There are no colossal palaces or grandiose royal tombs shouting of a single, all-powerful ruler. This has led scholars to theorize that their society was organized differently, perhaps governed by a council of elders or merchants. Their road network, then, might have been designed not for the procession of kings, but for the smooth, reliable flow of goods from hinterland villages to urban centers and onto waiting ships. It was a system built for economic integration, not imperial glory. This makes their eventual decline all the more poignant. What if the collapse of this meticulously planned civilization was tied to the unraveling of these very connections? Research suggests that climatic changes may have disrupted the monsoon patterns that fed their rivers and sustained their agriculture. As their core cities weakened, the long, delicate threads of trade that stretched to Mesopotamia and Central Asia would have frayed and finally snapped. The loss of those exchanges may have been the final blow to a system dependent on its far-reaching networks. From the water-focused, enigmatic roads of the Indus, we journey to a civilization that left no doubt about its power, stamping its authority onto the landscape with roads literally set in stone. The Egyptian sun beat down on a line of laborers, their feet scuffing against a surface far more durable than sand, a stone-paved highway engineered for a singular, monumental purpose. They hauled immense limestone blocks on heavy wooden sledges, moving toward the rising silhouette of a pyramid. In Egypt, the road was not a path for the common traveler. It was a specialized instrument of state power, meticulously built for sledges, sacred processions, and the march of armies. As Egyptologist Salama Ikram explains, Egypt's roads were vital lifelines, connecting the Nile Valley to mines in the eastern desert and ports on the Red Sea. These were not mere dirt tracks. The most famous was the grand paved causeway that connected the Great Pyramid's Valley Temple by the river to its mortuary temple at the pyramid's base. This was more than a functional ramp. It was a ceremonial corridor designed for the final, sacred journey of the pharaoh's remains. That same level of engineering ambition was applied to the empire's economic arteries. Consider the vital routes stretching into the Sinai Peninsula to places like Serabit el-Qadim. Here, the Egyptians established remote mining outposts to extract turquoise and copper. The road to this site was a lifeline, supporting not just the miners, but the entire operation that fed essential materials back to the Nile. The transport of obelisks and colossal statues along these routes remains a logistical puzzle that stumps modern engineers. How did they move a 700-ton granite colossus for miles? The answer lies in a combination of immense manpower, lubricated wooden sledges, and these purpose-built roads, which provided a firm, level surface that sand could never offer. Recent discoveries, like a paved road in the Fayum region, reveal the internal networks that sustained the kingdom, connecting agricultural centers to the Nile for the efficient movement of grain and goods. For military expansion, the Egyptians relied on the Ways of Horus, a coastal road running along the northern Sinai into the Levant. This was the empire's strategic highway, allowing for the rapid deployment of troops to secure borders and control trade routes into neighboring lands. But the Egyptian road was also deeply spiritual. How did their profound belief in the afterlife shape these pathways? Ceremonial roads, like the one connecting the temples of Karnak and Luxor, were seen as divine passages. Their very orientation was often aligned with celestial events or symbolic geography, transforming a physical journey into a spiritual one, a reflection of the pharaoh's eternal voyage. The Egyptians perfected the road as a tool for eternity, yet another civilization would look upon this concept and envision a network to bind an entire continent. The clatter of hooves was a sound of imperial power, a rhythmic drumbeat carrying the will of a king across 2,500 kilometers of mountain and plain. This was the Persian royal road, a feat of logistical genius that transformed a sprawling collection of conquered lands into a unified empire. The Achaemenid Persians understood that control was not merely about military victories, but about the speed of information. Their royal road was the nervous system of this colossal body, a network so efficient that a mounted courier, a paradazish, could carry a message from the capital at Susa to the distant satrapy of Sardis in just 7 days. For a traveler on foot, that same journey would have taken 3 months. This astonishing speed was made possible by an infrastructure of breathtaking precision. Along the entire route, at intervals of a day's ride, stood relay stations. At each one, a fresh horse stood ready, and a new rider waited to take the sealed message and continue the gallop without a moment's pause. It was an ancient pony express operating with the relentless efficiency of a modern data packet routing across the internet. For the most urgent of royal decrees, a system of fire signals could flash a simple pre-arranged message across the empire in a single night. The road itself was a maintained artery, with crews ensuring its surface was clear and its bridges secure for the constant flow of imperial traffic. But the true brilliance of the Persian system was its ability to integrate. The royal road was rarely built from scratch. Instead, Persian engineers surveyed the landscape, linking pre-existing local paths, caravan trails, and older roadways into a single, cohesive, and supervised whole. They imposed a grand design upon the organic growth of centuries, creating a seamless highway that stretched from the Aegean Sea to the heart of the Indus Valley. This was more than a communication line, it was a conduit for the entire empire. Along its length moved not only royal couriers but also columns of soldiers, tax collectors transporting tribute back to the king, and vast trade caravans carrying goods between continents. The safety and predictability offered by this imperial highway lowered the risks of long-distance trade, allowing commerce and culture to flow as never before. A striking testament to the road's permanence and utility comes from an unlikely source, a Greek army. The 10,000 Greek mercenaries chronicled by Xenophon in his work, the Anomalies, found themselves stranded deep inside the Persian Empire after a failed military campaign. Their epic march to safety, their journey to the sea, was only possible because they could follow the reliable roads, find water at the established stations, and navigate using the clear paths maintained by their enemies. They were walking on the very infrastructure of the empire that sought to destroy them. The royal road stands as a timeless lesson in governance. It shows that connecting diverse peoples, whether through physical roads or digital networks, is the key to managing complexity on a grand scale. It fostered a surprising level of cultural exchange, with ideas, artistic styles, and religious concepts flowing between Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India. This ancient model of efficient long-distance communication challenges us to consider what it truly takes to hold a vast and diverse society together. While the Persians were mastering the continents with their engineered highways, other civilizations were confronting a different kind of frontier, learning to navigate the trackless, shifting pathways of the open sea. The creak of cedar planks and the scent of salt air marked a different kind of journey, one that left no permanent track on the land. For ancient merchants, the open sea was not a barrier but a dynamic highway, faster and far more efficient than any overland caravan. A single ship could carry the cargo of hundreds of donkeys, connecting coastal cities and cultures with a speed that land routes could never match. The evidence for these first sea lanes lies preserved in the deep, in the silent testimonies of shipwrecks. Off the coast of Turkey, the discovery of the Uluburun ship, a vessel from the late Bronze Age, offered a stunning snapshot of this interconnected world. Its hull held a vast and cosmopolitan cargo, a collection of goods from at least 7 different cultures. There were copper ingots from Cyprus, tin likely from Anatolia or beyond, Canaanite jars filled with resin, Egyptian gold, Baltic amber, and even an Italian sword. This was not a random assortment, it was a floating marketplace, a clear indicator of a complex and organized maritime trade network spanning the entire eastern Mediterranean. To navigate these trackless blue roads, ancient mariners relied on a deep understanding of their environment. They followed known landmarks along the coast, tracked the sun and stars for direction, and passed down knowledge of currents and seasonal winds from one generation to the next. This mastery of the sea allowed for the rise of the first great maritime powers. The Minoans of Crete established what some scholars call a thalassocracy, a sea-based empire, their sleek ships creating a web of influence across the Aegean, distributing their vibrant art and culture. Later, the Phoenicians became the undisputed masters of Mediterranean commerce. From their cities like Tyre and Sidon, they sailed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, establishing colonies from North Africa to Spain. Their most famous commodity was a vivid purple dye extracted from the murex shellfish, so rare and labor-intensive to produce. This dye colored the robes of royalty from Mesopotamia to Rome, and its entire distribution relied on the speed and reach of Phoenician ships. This maritime network was not confined to the Mediterranean. In the Indian Ocean, monsoon winds created a natural, predictable clock for sailors. For 6 months, the winds blew steadily toward India, and for the other 6, they reversed, blowing back toward Arabia and Africa. Harnessing this rhythm, merchants could make annual voyages, connecting the Mesopotamian world with the Indus Valley and the source of treasured spices. The relative ease and lower cost of moving goods by water, compared to the arduous and dangerous overland trek, dramatically accelerated the exchange of not just commodities, but also technologies, languages, and ideas. A single successful voyage could introduce a new metal alloy or a revolutionary ship designed to a distant port, changing the course of a civilization. Yet, while these sea lanes connected continents, some of the most profound and enduring roads were built for a purpose that transcended both commerce and imperial ambition, reaching instead for the divine. The scent of frankincense was a ghost on the hot desert wind, a fragrance so precious it could build kingdoms from sand. For over 1,000 years, the incense route wove a delicate web of land and sea paths across the Arabian Peninsula, its entire existence dedicated to moving 2 sacred resins, frankincense and myrrh, from the remote groves of southern Arabia to the temples and wealthy homes of the Mediterranean. This was not a simple trade in goods, but a commerce in the very aroma of the divine, a substance so valued it was often exchanged for its weight in gold. The journey began in the kingdom of Saba, in what is now Yemen, where the scraggly frankincense trees were carefully tapped. The hardened resin tears were then loaded onto caravans that could number thousands of camels, a slow-moving river of wealth flowing north. The domestication of the camel was the fundamental innovation that made this possible. These ships of the desert could travel for days without water, carrying heavy loads across landscapes that would have been impassable for other pack animals. They were the engines of this entire economy. Supporting this vast operation required incredible feats of engineering in the heart of the desert. The Sabaean capital of Marib was sustained by a massive earth dam, a marvel of hydrology that captured seasonal floodwaters. This allowed for the irrigation of extensive farmlands, producing the surplus food needed to feed the merchants, guards, and camel drivers who kept the trade flowing. The route itself was a chain of controlled oases and fortified cities, each one growing wealthy by taxing the passing caravans. The Nabateans, a nomadic tribe, mastered this system of control. From their hidden capital at Petra, they commanded the northern reaches of the route. By carefully managing water sources and providing protection, they exacted heavy tolls on the incense caravans, and with that wealth, they performed a miracle in stone. The magnificent facades of Petra's tombs and temples were not just built with this wealth, they were literally carved from it. The rose-red cliffs themselves transformed into a monument to luxury trade. The uses for these resins were as varied as they were vital. In Rome, frankincense smoke was essential for every state religious ceremony, a fragrant bridge to the gods. In Egypt, myrrh was a key ingredient in the embalming process for the elite, and across the ancient world, Both were used as medicines, perfumes, and a symbol of ultimate luxury in private homes. The rise and fall of this route is a powerful lesson in how the human desire for a single luxury can sculpt geography, create vast infrastructure, and elevate obscure tribes to imperial power. When tastes changed and new sea routes to India bypassed the Arabian overland trek, the kingdoms that depended on the incense traffic slowly faded, their great dams and cities eventually reclaimed by the desert sands. This network was built to satisfy a spiritual hunger, yet it was the relentless physical hunger of another empire that would produce the most organized and enduring road system the world had ever known. The Roman surveyor's groma was more than a tool. It was an instrument of imperial will, carving lines of absolute order into the chaotic earth. This relentless pursuit of the straight line, cutting across hills and valleys alike, was the physical manifestation of a single, powerful idea that all roads must lead to Rome. The resulting network was the ultimate fusion of engineering and ambition, a skeleton of stone upon which an empire was built. The process was meticulously documented by engineers like Vitruvius, revealing a construction method of almost unbelievable durability. First, laborers would dig down to a stable substrate, flanking the trench with deep drainage ditches. Then, they built up the road in layers, a foundation of large stones, a middle course of smaller gravel and rubble mixed with lime, and finally a surface of tightly fitted, interlocking paving stones. The road was not flat. It possessed a subtle camber, a convex curve that allowed rainwater to run off into the ditches, protecting the integrity of the roadbed from the destructive force of standing water. This was infrastructure designed to outlive its creators, and indeed, many of these roads are still visible today. To maintain this directness, Roman engineers became masters of overcoming obstacles. They built soaring arched bridges across wide rivers, carved tunnels through solid rock, and constructed immense viaducts to carry their roads across marshy lowlands. Every 1,000 paces, a milestone was placed, informing travelers of the distance to the next major town, and ultimately to the golden milestone in the Roman Forum, the symbolic center of the world. This system served a paramount strategic purpose: the rapid deployment of legions. A Roman army, marching in disciplined formation, could cover 25 miles a day on these reliable surfaces, a logistical advantage that allowed Rome to respond to rebellions and threats with stunning speed. But the roads carried more than soldiers; they carried the lifeblood of commerce. With security guaranteed by the Roman peace, merchants could move goods from Britain to Egypt with a predictability never before known, their wagons rolling on surfaces that were smooth and wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass. This economic integration was supported by the cursus publicus, the Imperial Postal Service, a network of way stations with fresh horses and dedicated couriers that allowed official communications to race across the empire with an efficiency that would not be rivaled for over 1,000 years. The Appian Way stands as the classic example. Begun in 312 BCE by the censor Appius Claudius Caecus, it initially connected Rome to Capua. It was more than a road; it was a statement of Roman power, an arrow shot into the heart of Italy. Later extended to the port of Brundisium, it became the primary gateway to the east, a conduit for armies, traders, and travelers embarking for Greece and beyond. Its stone blocks, worn smooth by countless footsteps, tell a story of military ambition, commercial vitality, and cultural exchange. The empire's collapse did not erase these pathways from the land. For centuries after, these durable roads continued to dictate the flow of life. Medieval trade routes often followed the old Roman lines. New towns grew up at former way stations, and the property boundaries of modern European farms can still trace their straight lines back to the surveys of Roman agrimensors. The physical network was a permanent gift to posterity, but the true legacy of these roads was not the stone itself, but the constant, swirling exchange of ideas they made possible. The true wealth of the Silk Road was measured not in bolts of fabric, but in the weight of shared knowledge. While Chinese silk was indeed a legendary commodity, coveted from Rome to Persia, it was just one thread in a far richer tapestry of exchange. The caravans that plodded across the Taklamakan Desert carried technologies that would revolutionize the world. The secret of papermaking, guarded for centuries in China, traveled westward along these routes, eventually replacing cumbersome papyrus and parchment and democratizing literacy across continents. Even the formula for gunpowder, first developed for Chinese fireworks and medicine, made its way to Europe, where it would fundamentally alter the nature of warfare and castle construction. This was a two-way street, with innovations like glassblowing and advanced viticulture moving eastward into China. But the most profound exchanges were not material at all. They were the slow, patient migration of entire belief systems. Buddhism, born in India, found fertile new ground in Central Asia and then China, its journey etched into the magnificent cave temples of Dunhuang. Here, a traveler could see Indian, Chinese, and Central Asian artistic styles blending seamlessly on the walls, a silent symphony of cultural fusion. This spiritual traffic moved in all directions. Nestorian Christianity established communities deep within the Tang dynasty capital, while Islam spread peacefully not by the sword, but along the well-worn paths of merchant caravans reaching the courts of Chinese emperors. The stability required for such a vast, delicate network to thrive often came from an unexpected source, the very nomadic empires often portrayed as destroyers. Groups like the Xiongnu and later the Mongols understood that their power and wealth were amplified not by severing these routes, but by controlling and protecting them. They imposed a form of order, the Pax Mongolica, that lowered risks for merchants and allowed a Venetian like Marco Polo to travel safely from one end of Asia to the other. The entire system pulsed with life at its oasis cities. In a place like Kashgar at the crossroads of the world, you could hear a dozen languages in the market. A Persian astrologer might consult a medical text translated from Sanskrit, while a Uyghur merchant bartered for a new breed of horse from the steppes. The journey of the Buddhist monk Xuanzang in the 7th century encapsulates this quest for knowledge. His 17-year pilgrimage from China to India and back was not for silk or spice, but for sacred Buddhist scriptures. The detailed accounts he brought home did more than just enrich Chinese Buddhism. They provided a priceless geographical and ethnographic record of the Silk Road in its prime, a snapshot of a connected world. So we must ask, was the most valuable cargo carried on those camels actually intangible? Was it the astronomical charts that mapped the heavens, the medical texts that offered new cures, or the philosophical ideas that challenged old ways of thinking? This unparalleled network of exchange in Eurasia presents a fascinating counterpoint, because at the very same time, across the vast ocean, another set of first cities was being connected by a web of roads conceived in total isolation. A Chasqui runner sprints along a stone path, his breath a cloud in the thin air 4,000 meters above the sea. He carries no written scroll, but a quipu, a complex record of knots and chords, relaying information across the empire with a speed that astonished the Spanish conquistadors. This was the Quhapac Ñan, the royal road of the Inca, a staggering 40,000-kilometer network that bound together the most vertically challenging empire on Earth, stretching from modern Colombia down through Chile. As explorer and archaeologist Johann Reinhard notes, the Inca road system stands as one of the most extraordinary feats of engineering in the pre-industrial world. a masterpiece built without the wheel, without iron, and without the power of draft animals. How did they achieve this? They sculpted the mountains themselves, carving stone stairways into sheer slopes and tunneling through solid rock where necessary. To cross the dizzying ravines that split the high Andes, they engineered suspension bridges woven from native grasses, cables as thick as a man's body, which were replaced in a communal effort each year. At precise intervals, a day's walk apart, stood tambos, way stations that provided shelter and supplies for imperial messengers and official caravans. This was not a network built in isolation. The Incas were brilliant integrators, often incorporating and improving upon older local trails established by the Weri, Tiwanaku, and other preceding cultures, weaving them into a new, unified system of control. The primary purpose of this vast web was state administration. It allowed for the rapid movement of the imperial army, a key to the Incas' lightning-fast expansion. It facilitated the collection and transport of tax goods, part of a labor tribute system known as the mitre, and it enabled imperial administrators to travel to the farthest corners of the realm, ensuring that the will of the Sapa Inca in Cusco was felt everywhere. The famous Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, with its breathtaking vistas, is merely a single, spectacular thread in this immense tapestry, a pathway that once served a vital ceremonial and administrative function. The empire's mastery over such impossible terrain through road building was the very backbone of its power, allowing it to manage a vast and diverse collection of peoples. The physical evidence of the Quhapac Nyan is a testament to human ingenuity, but to truly understand its impact, we must listen for the echoes of the people who walked its stones. The sun rose on 1,000 mornings, each one finding the caravaneer already in motion. His world was not a city, but the path itself, a ribbon of dust and stone stretching toward a shimmering horizon. For every grand name like the Royal Road or the Silk Road, there were countless anonymous souls whose footsteps gave it life. These merchants, guides, guards, and camel drivers formed the true, beating heart of the ancient networks, their personal stories now whispers in the wind, but their collective impact etched into history. As social historian Janet Abu-Lughod reminds us, the history of these routes is not just about goods and empires, but about the countless individuals whose labor and knowledge made the exchange possible. Their expertise was a kind of living map passed down through generations, not in writing, but in song, story, and shared experience. A caravan master knew which mountain pass would be clear in early spring, and which dried up riverbed or wadi concealed a secret spring just beneath the surface. His life depended on this knowledge as much as it did on the strength of his animals. The care of these creatures was a science in itself. Different beasts were suited for different terrains. Sturdy donkeys carried goods through the rocky highlands of Anatolia, while the single-humped dromedary camel was the undisputed ship of the desert, capable of traveling for over a week without water. In the high Andes, trains of sure-footed llamas, each carrying a modest load, were the only pack animals capable of thriving in the thin air. This was not a solitary endeavor. A large caravan was a traveling village, a multicultural mosaic of people from different lands, speaking a babel of languages. A single train might include a Nubian guard hired in Egypt, a Babylonian merchant who understood the exchange rates in Ur, and a guide from a local desert tribe who could navigate by the stars. They developed their own social codes and rules of the road to manage this diversity, settling disputes and maintaining order far from any official court. This constant intermingling made the caravans themselves agents of cultural exchange. Around the evening fire, a song from the Indus Valley might be learned by a musician from Mesopotamia, or a folk tale from the steppes would be told and retold, its details slowly changing with each new telling. Sometimes this exchange happened without any direct contact at all. The Greek historian Herodotus described a fascinating tradition known as the silent trade. One group of traders would leave their goods, perhaps salt or cloth, at a recognized spot and then withdraw. Another group would then approach, inspect the goods, leave what they considered a fair amount of gold or other commodities, and also retreat. The first group would return, and if they were satisfied, they would take the payment and leave. If not, they would withdraw again, waiting for more to be added. This intricate dance of commerce, built entirely on trust and custom, allowed for trade between groups who did not share a language or who may have been in conflict. What was the human cost of this life constantly in motion? These caravaneers faced immense hardship, from the threat of bandits in lonely gorges to the relentless thirst of desert crossings. They spent months, sometimes years, away from their families, their own personal stories unfolding in the spaces between the world's first cities. They were the indispensable links, the human glue that held the ancient world together, and the precious goods they carried reveal a surprisingly sophisticated system of ancient economics. A merchant's pack was a capsule of civilization's needs and desires, holding far more than exotic treasures. Alongside the rare silks and gemstones traveled the fundamental materials that powered daily life across continents. Heavy sacks of grain, essential for feeding dense urban populations, moved from fertile regions to hungry cities. Timber for construction, salt for preserving food, and vast quantities of pottery for storage and cooking formed the bulk of this trade, the unsung heroes of ancient commerce. These were the goods that sustained the very possibility of city life, moving along routes that functioned as the supply lines for an emerging world. Luxury items, while less voluminous, carried immense cultural and economic weight. The deep blue of lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, the gleam of ivory from African elephants, and the vibrant purple of Phoenician dye were more than mere adornments. They were physical symbols of power and sanctity, used in royal regalia and religious art to legitimize rulers and connect humanity to the divine. The discovery of black peppercorns from India within the wrappings of the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II is a stunning example. This spice, found in a resting place from over 3,000 years ago, proves that long-distance trade networks connected the Nile to the Indian subcontinent, bringing the flavors of a distant world to the highest levels of society. But the cargo was not limited to objects. Living things were constant travelers on these roads. Tribute missions from distant lands would bring exotic animals like lions, tigers, and peacocks for royal menageries, living symbols of a king's far-reaching power. More profoundly, the spread of agricultural staples reshaped entire landscapes. Wheat and barley, first domesticated in the Fertile Crescent, were carried by farmers and traders into Europe, Asia, and North Africa. New fruits, vegetables, and even farming techniques moved along these same paths, slowly transforming local diets and enabling populations to grow. Knowledge of medicinal herbs traveled with them, as healers exchanged remedies for common ailments, creating an early, informal network of shared well-being. This constant flow of materials did more than satisfy demand. It actively sparked innovation. The need for stronger metals drove the development of new bronze alloys, with tin from one region being combined with copper from another. Potters, exposed to new styles and techniques from distant cultures, adapted their designs and firing methods, leading to more beautiful and durable ceramics. The movement of glassmaking technology from Mesopotamia to Egypt and beyond is a clear case of a craft migrating along trade routes, evolving with each new community that embraced it. Yet, the same pathways that carried life-giving goods and revolutionary ideas also carried unseen passengers. The very connections that allowed for the exchange of knowledge and commerce also facilitated the spread of illness. As people and animals moved across continents, they sometimes brought health challenges with them, inadvertently introducing new sicknesses to populations with no prior exposure. These events could lead to periods of significant loss, reshaping societies in their wake. This tragic aspect of interconnection reminds us that the roads were neutral channels, carrying both the seeds of flourishing civilization and the agents of its hardship. The legacy of these pathways is therefore deeply complex, a story of both magnificent achievement and profound human cost, forever linking the fates of the world's first cities. A solitary traveler moves along a dusty road, a single thread in a vast web of connectivity. He carries no visible cargo, yet within him travels an unseen passenger, a pathogen to which his body has grown accustomed. When he reaches the crowded streets of a trading hub, this microscopic stowaway finds a new home, leaping into a population with no defenses. The very networks that built the ancient world now served as a superhighway for illness. As historian William H. McNeill observed, the unification of the ancient world through trade was also the unification of its pool of sickness. The roads and sea lanes that carried silk and spices could not distinguish between a bale of cloth and a deadly virus. This was the tragic paradox of connection, where the channels of prosperity also became conduits for catastrophe. We see this clearly in the Antonine Plague, which swept through the Roman Empire in the 2nd century. Likely a form of smallpox, it is thought to have been carried by troops returning from campaigns in Mesopotamia. The legions, masters of moving quickly on Roman roads, inadvertently brought back a foe they could not fight. The disease spread with terrifying speed through the interconnected cities of the empire, contributing to a period of profound instability and loss. Centuries later, the Justinianic plague arrived in Constantinople via ships carrying grain from Egypt. The bustling ports that fed the great city became its point of vulnerability, as the illness, likely bubonic plague, found a perfect environment in the dense urban population. The resulting hardship reshaped the Byzantine Empire, thinning its armies and straining its economy. This pattern reveals a brutal truth: the more efficient the network, the faster a health crisis could travel. Even the later Mongol Empire, with its highly unified continental system, may have facilitated the spread of the Black Death in the 14th century, demonstrating a long-term pattern where peace and connectivity could have unintended consequences. Evidence suggests these dynamics began much earlier. Researchers studying remains from Neolithic villages in Germany have found signs of a hepatitis epidemic, potentially spread through trade contacts between small, once isolated communities. The introduction of a new illness could have been devastating for these early populations. How did such events alter the course of history? A major outbreak could depopulate entire regions, cripple agricultural production, and shatter the confidence in central authority. Some trade routes associated with the memory of sickness may have been abandoned, while the weakening of an empire's manpower could leave its borders undefended. Yet, even as the roads carried physical suffering, they also transported the very ideas that helped people endure. New religious and philosophical worldviews traveled along these same paths, offering frameworks for understanding loss and concepts of resilience. The channels that brought the plague also carried the seeds of comfort, a reminder that human connection, for all its risks, has always been our greatest source of both vulnerability and strength. The patient translation of a sacred text in a dusty cave was an act of cultural alchemy, transforming the spiritual landscape of entire nations. These roads did not merely carry spices and silk, they were the primary conduits for the world's great faiths, transmitting beliefs with a permanence that often outlasted the empires that built the pathways. As religious scholar Karen Armstrong notes, the great traditions we call religions were not born in isolation. They were constantly refined and redefined through encounter and exchange on these routes. A Buddhist monk, having walked for years from India, would not simply recite sutras in a Central Asian caravanserai. He would slowly adapt his teachings, his stories, and even the artistic depictions of the Buddha to resonate with local populations, a process that transformed Indian Buddhism into the distinct traditions of Central Asia, China, and eventually Japan. This was not a one-way street. The expansion of Christianity was turbocharged by the efficiency of Roman roads, allowing missionaries to travel from Jerusalem to Spain and Britain. But its reach extended far beyond the Roman world, with ancient traditions placing the Apostle Thomas in India and the conversion of the Aksumite kingdom in Ethiopia, creating enduring Christian communities connected by these early global pathways. Earlier still, the Persian Empire served as a highway for Zoroastrianism, with its dualistic vision of cosmic struggle, and later for the eclectic faith of Manichaeism, which blended elements from Christianity, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism itself into a new synthesis that spread from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Merchant communities were the unsung architects of this spiritual exchange. A group of Persian traders settling in a Chinese port city would establish a small temple to their faith, a quiet beacon for the curious and the homesick. These diasporic centers became nodes in a global network of belief, places where ideas could be shared and where local converts could begin their own journeys. The adaptation of religious art tells a vivid story of this fusion. In the Gandharan region, where Greek influence met Buddhist devotion, we see a stunning transformation. The muscular Greek hero Heracles, club in hand, is reimagined as the Buddhist protector deity Vajrapani, standing guard beside the Buddha. This was not mere artistic borrowing, it was a profound dialogue in stone, a way to make a new philosophy feel familiar and powerful to a diverse population. These encounters inevitably led to both creative synthesis and, at times, tension. The meeting of different dogmas could spark conflict, but more often it led to a rich cross-pollination of ideas, of rituals, and of spiritual metaphors that forever shaped the world's religious map. And as these faiths traveled, so too did the need to record their sacred words, a demand that would help spur one of humanity's most revolutionary inventions. A merchant's caravan needed more than goods, it needed a way to record its debts and contracts. In the bustling port of Ugarit, a scribe once took a stylus to wet clay, not to inscribe the complex syllabic cuneiform of Mesopotamia, but to experiment with a radical simplification. He assigned a series of signs to represent consonant sounds alone, creating one of the world's first alphabets. This was not an act of pure invention for its own sake, but a practical solution born from the frantic pace of international commerce, where speed and clarity in record-keeping were paramount. As linguist Stephen Roger Fisher observed, the history of writing is a history of cultural contact and the needs of commerce and administration. The very roads and sea lanes that moved spices and metals became the channels through which the technology of writing itself traveled, adapted, and was utterly transformed. This journey of scripts across the ancient world is a story of constant reinvention. Centuries before the scribe at Ugarit, Semitic workers in the Sinai desert, likely exposed to Egyptian hieroglyphs through mining operations, took a revolutionary step. They looked at those elaborate pictorial symbols and distilled them into a set of about 24 signs representing consonants, creating what scholars call the Proto-Sinaitic script. This conceptual leap from a complex system of hundreds of signs to a streamlined alphabet was a breakthrough in efficiency. This idea then traveled to the Levant, where it was refined by the Phoenicians into a fully realized alphabet. The Phoenician script, with its 22 simple characters, was perfectly suited for the quick notations of merchants, and it was this portable, efficient system that their traders carried across the Mediterranean. It was adopted and adapted by the Greeks, who added vowels, and from there it passed to the Etruscans and then the Romans, eventually giving rise to the very letters you are reading now. Meanwhile, the older, more complex writing systems also traveled along these networks. The cuneiform script of Mesopotamia, written with a reed stylus on clay tablets, was not confined to the land between the rivers. It was adopted and adapted by distant powers like the Hittites in Anatolia and the Elamites in Iran, who used its wedges and lines to write their own completely different languages. This required a remarkable intellectual feat, adapting the sound and meaning values of foreign signs to fit a new linguistic reality. This transfer of knowledge was facilitated by the multilingual communities that thrived at major trading hubs and imperial centers. In these cosmopolitan cities, scribes had to be linguists, diplomats, and accountants all at once. Perhaps no single object better encapsulates this layered history of writing than the Rosetta Stone. This dark slab of granodiorite, inscribed in 2 languages but 3 scripts, is a product of a multicultural empire. It presents the same decree in classical Egyptian hieroglyphs, in Demotic, the everyday script of Egypt, and in Koine Greek, the language of the ruling Ptolemaic dynasty. It is a frozen moment of administrative communication, designed to be understood across the different literacies of the kingdom, and it stands as a powerful testament to how scripts could coexist and carry authority in a connected world. The success of a script was often determined by the same principles that governed a successful trade good: its portability, its efficiency, and its adaptability. The Phoenician alphabet spread not through conquest but through its sheer utility for commerce. The Aramaic script, another Semitic derivative, became so widespread under the Assyrian and Persian empires that it was later used to write imperial inscriptions in Old Persian, a language from a completely different family. Similarly, the Greek alphabet was adopted by the Romans to write Latin, another linguistic leap that would shape Western history. And we must remember that writing emerged independently in other cradles of civilization, in China with its oracle bone script and in Mesoamerica with the glyphs of the Maya. These were separate inventions, yet they served the same universal human impulse to record, to communicate, and to make things permanent. As these scripts traveled, they did not carry empty symbols. They carried the entire weight of the knowledge, literature, and laws they recorded, from epic poetry to legal codes, forever altering the intellectual landscape of every culture they touched. A Babylonian astronomical tablet, inscribed with the precise movements of the planet Venus, could find itself centuries later in the hands of a Greek scholar in Alexandria. The data it held did not fade with its clay. It traveled, copied, and refined, eventually influencing the very foundations of Hellenistic science. This was the most precious cargo on the ancient roads, the silent, relentless flow of knowledge. Technological and scientific innovations moved along these pathways, often shedding their original identity to become a shared human inheritance. As historian James E. McClellan III observed, technological diffusion is one of the most persistent features of human history, and ancient trade routes were its primary vehicle. Consider the journey of mathematical ideas, the sophisticated place value system, a breakthrough that gave meaning to the position of a digit, is often associated with Indian mathematicians. Yet its conceptual roots can be traced back to earlier Babylonian astronomy and mathematics, suggesting a slow, cross-continental exchange of numerical principles that would one day revolutionize mathematics everywhere. Or examine the spread of practical engineering like the Carnot system. This was a brilliant method for tapping groundwater in arid regions, a gently sloping tunnel that brought water from a mountain aquifer to a parched valley without a single drop lost to evaporation. First perfected in ancient Persia, the knowledge of how to construct these subterranean canals traveled westward across the Middle East and into North Africa, enabling settlement and agriculture in otherwise uninhabitable landscapes. The knowledge of metallurgy moved with the same deliberate pace. The complex process of smelting copper and alloying it with tin to create bronze was not discovered once and kept secret. It spread, its techniques carried by itinerant metalworkers from the Caucasus to the Aegean, and eventually across Eurasia. Later, the even more difficult technology for smelting iron followed similar paths. Its secrets slowly unraveled and shared until it became the backbone of tools and weapons from China to Britain. How did such specialized knowledge make its way across vast distances and language barriers? Often, it was carried not in scrolls, but in the minds and hands of people. The forced relocation of skilled artisans, whether as captives of war or as valued slaves, became an unintended engine of technological transfer. A master potter from one city, taken to another, would bring not just his skill but his entire understanding of kiln temperatures and glaze chemistry. This knowledge exchange was rarely a single event, but a centuries-long process of piecemeal adoption, local adaptation, and gradual improvement. A perfect illustration of this slow-motion revolution is the stirrup. Invented in South Asia, it was a simple loop of leather or metal that gave a rider unprecedented stability. This idea traveled north to the steppes, was adopted by Central Asian cavalry, and eventually reached Europe. Its arrival there fundamentally changed the dynamics of combat, allowing for the rise of the heavily armored knight and altering the social and military structures of the continent. It makes you wonder when we see similar technologies appearing independently in different parts of the world. Was it always a true, independent invention? Or was it sometimes sparked by a faint, filtered rumor of a distant achievement, a whisper carried on the wind by a lone traveler from a far-off land? These roads provided the channels for this continuous, vital conversation of human ingenuity. But what became of that conversation when the roads themselves fell silent? When the constant flow of people and ideas was suddenly, tragically, cut short? A single broken cartwheel, half buried in the dust of a forgotten pass, tells a silent story of a journey that never reached its end. The great abandonment of these continental networks was a slow unraveling, not a sudden snap. The very interdependence they fostered, the lifeblood of civilization, became their greatest weakness when the heart of the system faltered. When a central empire like Rome or the Indus Valley Authority crumbled, the consequences rippled outward with devastating effect. The legions that had patrolled the highways, the administrators who organized the way stations, the engineers who maintained the bridges, all vanished. Security dissolved and banditry flourished, making travel a deadly gamble. Without a central power to fund their upkeep, the roads themselves began to decay. A single landslide blocking a mountain pass or a collapsed bridge over a ravine could render an entire route impassable, severing a city from its lifeline for generations. Trade, the relentless engine of these pathways, also changed course. The discovery of reliable monsoon winds by the Greek navigator Hippalus was a quiet revolution. Suddenly, a single ship could sail directly from the Red Sea to India and back in a year, carrying a cargo that would have required 1,000 camels and a much riskier overland trek. Maritime routes became the new superhighways, offering greater capacity and lower cost. Why brave the bandits and tolls of the desert when the sea lanes were open? This shift in trade patterns left once prosperous overland routes like the Incense route to wither. The The demand for its sacred frankincense further dwindled as the Roman Empire embraced Christianity, shifting religious practices away from the copious temple incense of older traditions. The kingdoms that had grown fat on this trade found their wealth evaporating, their great dams and cities slowly reclaimed by the sand. Environmental pressures added another layer of strain. Paleoclimatologists studying ancient pollen and lake sediments have found evidence of prolonged droughts that struck at the core of agricultural societies. A centuries-long shift to a drier climate could have turned marginal farmlands into desert, starving the cities they supported and depopulating the countryside that fed the caravans. In other regions, soil exhaustion from centuries of intensive farming or the siltation of vital irrigation canals could have the same effect, slowly choking the productive capacity that made the entire network viable. These environmental challenges were often the silent partner in collapse, a slow-burning crisis that weakened societies just as other pressures mounted. Adding to this vulnerability were the health challenges that traveled along these very routes. The same connectivity that spread ideas could also spread illness, and a major outbreak could depopulate trade hubs and cripple the labor force needed to maintain the roads. Furthermore, the rise of new political powers often meant a shift in territorial priorities. A new empire might build its capital in a different location, focusing its resources on a new set of roads that served its own strategic needs, leaving the old networks to fade into obscurity. The stones of the old road were still there, but the will and the wealth to walk them were gone. The pathways fell silent, but the land never forgot the patterns they carved. That strangely straight line of hedges dividing two fields, or the footpath that seems to take an unnecessarily long route over a hill, might be more than just quirks of the landscape. They are often faint echoes, the ghosts of lost roads still embedded in our modern world. The English landscape historian Oliver Rackham described the countryside as a palimpsest, a document written over and over again, and its oldest writing is the network of tracks and boundaries. To see these ancient pathways, you simply need to know how to look. One of the most telling clues is the route itself. Before modern drainage, low-lying ground was often wet and boggy. Early travelers naturally sought the high, dry ground of ridgeways, following the spines of hills for miles. The famous Icknield Way in England is a perfect example, a prehistoric track that still exists as a modern footpath, following the same chalk ridge for thousands of years. In many parts of Europe, you can trace even older routes through the boundaries of medieval parishes. These long, straight divisions were often drawn along existing trackways, fossilizing the path in the landscape long after the road itself fell from regular use. Then there are the holloways, sunken lanes worn deep into the very soil by centuries of passing feet, hooves, and cartwheels. These are not just dips in the ground, they are grooves carved by generations of human movement, so deep that their walls are often covered in moss and roots. Folklore and local names provide another layer of evidence. A path known locally as the Driftway or the Drover's Road almost certainly marks a route where livestock were once moved to market. A name like Salter's Way points to a vital trade in a precious commodity. In Italy, the Via Aurelia is a modern road built directly atop its Roman namesake, the name itself a clue to its golden antiquity. Even the word street, from the Latin strata meaning a paved way, hints at a Roman origin when it appears in a place name. The next time you are out walking, pay attention to the subtle cues. Does a modern lane suddenly kink for no apparent reason, as if avoiding a long-vanished obstacle? Does a footpath follow a perfectly illogical course across a field, preserving the memory of an old property line or a forgotten destination? What ancient pathway might lie buried beneath your daily commute? Recognizing these traces is the first step to hearing the whispers of the past, but new technologies are now allowing us to listen to those whispers on a scale never before imagined. A researcher at a computer screen does not see a single map, but a digital tapestry woven from countless threads of data. This is the power of a Geographic Information System, or GIS, a tool that allows us to layer historical maps, satellite images, and known archaeological sites to computationally predict the ghost of a lost road. We are no longer just finding fragments, we are resurrecting entire networks. As digital archaeologist Maurizio Forte notes, the focus has shifted from mapping individual sites to mapping entire landscapes and the complex human interactions that moved through them. One of the most powerful techniques is least-cost path modeling. The computer analyzes the ancient terrain, calculating the easiest route between 2 points based not on modern speed, but on the logic of an ancient traveler. It considers the slope of a hill, the location of a vital water source, and the energy required to cross a river valley. The path that emerges is often a startling match for the faint lines we find on the ground. Beyond reconstructing single routes, network science allows us to analyze these systems as a whole. We can identify which cities were crucial hubs, which roads were vulnerable bottlenecks, and how resilient the entire web would have been to the loss of a single connection. This digital frontier even lets us walk these roads again. 3D virtual reality models, built from laser scans and archaeological data, can place you on a digitally rebuilt Roman road, allowing you to experience the engineered camber of the stones and the perspective of a traveler 2,000 years ago. This effort is now a global collaboration. Through crowdsourced platforms, anyone with an internet connection can help scour satellite imagery, searching for the straight lines and subtle discolorations that hint at a buried path. Artificial intelligence supercharges this search, training computers to recognize the spectral signatures of ancient roadbeds in vast datasets that would take a human a lifetime to review. A stunning example is the Silk Road Atlas Initiative, a dynamic digital map that layers trade goods, climate data, and historical accounts onto the geography of the entire network. It transforms the Silk Road from a static line on a map into a pulsing, breathing system. This deep digital understanding of ancient flow raises a compelling modern question. How might the connectivity and resilience of these old systems inform our own world? The way a Roman road bypassed a swamp or a Silk Road caravanserai created a node of cultural exchange holds lessons for designing robust supply chains and communication networks today. We are not just rebuilding roads of stone, we are decoding the fundamental principles of human connection. A faint track disappearing into a distant wood holds a promise that a paved highway never can. This deep-seated pull toward the path less traveled is etched into our oldest stories, from enchanted forest trails to epic quests across unknown lands. Our fascination with these lost roads is more than historical curiosity. It is a recognition of our most fundamental impulses, the drive to explore, to connect, and to seek meaning beyond the visible horizon. As the writer Robert Macfarlane beautifully notes, paths are the habits of a landscape, acts of consensual making. It is right that we feel such a deep and reciprocal connection to them. These ancient routes are monumental symbols of human ingenuity, a testament to the sheer will required to carve a line of order through the chaos of deserts and mountains. They stand as collective memorials to the anonymous millions whose footsteps wore down the stone, the merchants, pilgrims, and families whose individual stories are lost to time, but whose collective journey built the world. And they are wrapped in a romantic mystery, the thrilling possibility that around the next bend lies a lost city, a forgotten outpost, or simply a new perspective. This allure feeds a profound curiosity about our shared origins. To walk a road that connected the Indus Valley to Mesopotamia is to physically feel the interconnectedness of human history, to understand that isolation is a modern illusion. These pathways are also powerful physical metaphors for life itself, with its unexpected turns, its arduous climbs, and the companions we meet along the way. The enduring global popularity of pilgrimages like the Camino de Santiago makes perfect sense in this light. Modern travelers walk those same ancient Roman roads not just for religious reasons, but to fulfill a deep human need for meaningful travel, to strip life down to its essentials, and to follow in the symbolic footsteps of countless generations. That stirring in our soul when we see a path vanish into the horizon is a call to adventure that has echoed for millennia. It is this very call that now fuels a growing worldwide movement, not just to study these historic routes, but to walk them, map them, and preserve their fragile stories before they fade back into the earth for good. A volunteer's trowel gently scrapes away moss from a stone that has not felt the sun in centuries. This delicate work along a forgotten stretch of Roman road in Britain is not about excavation, but about stabilization, a quiet race against time to preserve what we have only just rediscovered. The modern threats to these ancient pathways are relentless and often invisible. The expansion of a city can pave over a buried road in a single season. Deep plowing for agriculture shatters the fragile archaeology just beneath the soil. Looters, searching for saleable artifacts, tear through sites with no regard for the context that gives objects their story. Even the changing climate poses a new danger, as increased rainfall and erosion wash away the very ground that has protected these routes for millennia. As heritage expert Douglas Kummer reminds us, each time a site is lost, a page of the human story is torn out and lost forever. In response, a multifaceted strategy for preservation has emerged, blending old-fashioned care with cutting-edge technology. The first line of defense is legal protection, designating entire ancient routes as heritage corridors. This creates a managed landscape, not just a series of isolated points, allowing planners to route new developments around these historic arteries rather than through them. From the sky, drones now act as silent guardians. Equipped with high-resolution cameras, they regularly survey known routes, tracking subtle changes in the landscape that might signal erosion, illegal digging, or damage from root systems. This non-invasive monitoring provides a constant health check without ever disturbing the ground. Perhaps the most vital strategy is the growing involvement of local communities. When people see a historic trail not as a government restriction but as a source of local pride and identity, they become its most passionate stewards. This work inevitably presents complex ethical choices. Is it better to fully excavate a beautiful section of road for the public to see, knowing exposure will accelerate its decay? Or is it more responsible to carefully document it and then rebury it, allowing the earth to continue its perfect preservation? There is no single answer, and each site demands its own difficult balance. Sustainable tourism has become a powerful tool in this effort. When managed carefully, it generates essential funds for maintenance and creates a global constituency of people who value these places. The Via Appia Antica outside Rome stands as a brilliant model, an archaeological park where you can walk or cycle along the original Roman paving, experiencing the road as a living space while its integrity is professionally maintained. On a global scale, international collaborations are formalizing this protection. The UNESCO World Heritage designation of the Inca Cuhapac Ñan, for instance, recognizes it as a treasure for all humanity, mobilizing resources and expertise from multiple countries to preserve its stunning bridges and high-altitude passages. How do we, as a global community, ensure these monuments to connection are not lost a second time? The answer lies in seeing them not as ruins of a dead past, but as active guides for our shared future, their preservation a promise to the generations yet to walk them. That same caravan laden with frankincense has never truly stopped moving. It has simply transformed, its goods now stacked in colorful metal containers on a ship gliding across a digital sea of logistics data. The fundamental architecture of our world, from global shipping lanes to the internet itself, is a direct inheritance from those first stone pathways. Sociologist Manuel Castells describes our era as dominated by a space of flows, where the movement of information, capital, and goods holds more power than any single place on a map. This is not a new phenomenon, it is the ultimate expression of an ancient logic. Consider the hub and spoke system used by every major airline, a perfect mirror of how ancient cities like Rome or Zion functioned as central nodes, with roads and sea lanes radiating outward to connect a vast periphery. The modern miracle of intermodal shipping, where a standardized container can move seamlessly from a ship to a train to a truck, finds its precursor in the standardized weights and measures of the Indus Valley, or the consistent axle widths of Roman carts designed for smooth travel across an entire continent. And the internet, that instantaneous global nervous system, is the spiritual successor to the Persian royal road, carrying information instead of royal decrees, yet serving the same core purpose of binding a vast and diverse system together. This deep continuity reveals that we are still solving the same basic problems of connection, just with different tools. The strategic importance of controlling geographic bottlenecks remains as potent today as it was 3,000 years ago. The ancient Strait of Hormuz, vital for the incense trade, is now a linchpin of global energy supplies. The modern Strait of Malacca, the narrow passage for a third of all maritime trade, has replaced the Khyber Pass as a critical choke point where empires project power and pirates, the modern equivalent of desert bandits, still threaten the flow of commerce. The vulnerabilities inherent in these networks are also timeless. A single blockage in the Suez Canal sends shockwaves through global supply chains, just as a landslide in a mountain pass once stranded 1,000 camels. A sophisticated cyber attack that cripples a port's logistics system is the direct descendant of a raid that targeted a caravanserai, both aiming to sever a vital artery of exchange. Perhaps the most striking modern example of this ancient legacy is China's Belt and Road Initiative, a colossal infrastructure project explicitly framed as a revival of the Silk Road. It is a conscious effort to build a new space of flows, laying down digital and physical pathways meant to reshape global trade and influence for the next century, proving that the map of power is still drawn along lines of connectivity. So what wisdom can we draw from the long history of these networks? The most resilient systems, like the Roman roads or the Silk Road under the Mongols, were those with redundancy, with multiple paths to reach a destination. They fostered cooperation and generated widespread prosperity rather than hoarding wealth in a single center. Their collapses often came when they became too brittle, too unequal, or too vulnerable to external shock. The story of our first roads is far from a forgotten relic. It is a living blueprint. It challenges us to ask if we are building networks that merely move goods faster, or ones that build a world more truly connected, resilient, and fair for the generations who will walk the paths we lay down today. Our journey across the continents and centuries ends not with a final destination, but with a new way of seeing. We have walked the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia and climbed the high passes of the Andes, tracing the ghostly imprint of a web that first bound humanity together. These roads carried more than silk and spices. They were the channels for the very foundations of our world, transmitting sacred faiths, revolutionary scripts, and the blueprints for civilization itself. The story of these lost roads reveals a stunning truth. Our modern, hyper-connected world is not a sudden invention, but the latest expression of a deep and ancient human impulse to reach out, to trade, and to share ideas. The key lesson echoing from those stone pathways to our digital networks is that connection, for all its inherent vulnerabilities, remains our most powerful engine for collective progress and mutual understanding. So the next time you look at a world map, try to see beyond the borders of nations. See instead the enduring network of pathways, both ancient and modern, that have always pulsed with the movement of people and ideas. We would love to hear from you. Do you know of any local legends about an old forgotten road in your own region, or a path that seems to hold a secret history? Share those stories in the comments below. If this exploration into our shared past has sparked your curiosity, please subscribe for more journeys into the mysteries that shaped our world. And remember, every road, however grand, began with a single, courageous step into the vast and waiting unknown. A vast network of ancient roads still lies hidden, waiting for its story to be told. While we have traced the great highways of Rome and the Silk Road, the map of the ancient world remains filled with tantalizing blank spaces. What undiscovered routes lie beneath the shifting sands of the Sahara? Could a trans-Saharan network have connected the powerful kingdoms of West Africa to the Mediterranean coast, carrying gold and salt and ideas across the world's greatest desert? The dense jungles of Southeast Asia hold another secret. LIDAR technology is only beginning to peer through the canopy, and it may soon reveal a sophisticated web of causeways and paths that link the sprawling metropolis of Inca to its distant neighbors, a network as complex as any in the ancient world. The frontiers of discovery are not just on land. Beneath the waves, underwater archaeologists are searching for the wrecks of the first ocean-going vessels, ships that dared to cross open water and established the earliest maritime superhighways. And in the high mountains, melting permafrost and retreating glaciers are beginning to yield their frozen treasures, offering perfectly preserved artifacts from travelers who crossed high-altitude passes thousands of years ago. The tools for this new exploration are as revolutionary as the discoveries themselves. Scientists are now using paleogenetics to read the stories written in ancient DNA, tracing human migration routes with a precision never before possible. They can analyze the isotopic signatures locked inside a single tooth from a human remain, effectively mapping that individual's life journey from their childhood homeland to their final resting place, revealing personal stories of migration across continents. Perhaps the most tantalizing puzzle is the ongoing effort to decipher lost scripts like the writing of the Indus Valley. If those symbols can ever be understood, they would not just reveal a language, they would open a vast archive of trade records, administrative decrees, and personal letters, finally giving voice to the people who managed that enigmatic civilization's far-flung connections. One of the greatest quests is the search for the land of Punt. Ancient Egyptian texts describe magnificent trading expeditions to this fabulously wealthy partner, a source of incense, gold, and exotic animals. Yet its precise location remains one of history's most enduring mysteries, a ghost on the map that could reshape our understanding of pharaonic trade networks. Every one of these future findings has the power to redraw our maps and rewrite the narrative of early civilization. They challenge us to see the past not as a fixed story, but as a living, breathing puzzle where the next great discovery is always just a single shovel test, one satellite image, or a newly translated word away from changing everything we thought we knew.